Hello?
There you are.
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
All
What
right.
what was that, Jack? That was
The speakers were muted for some reason.
something with the settings, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens. It's always mysterious every time.
Okay.
Tech obstacles.
Oh man. Well, here we are,
Here
Mark.
we are.
So
How are you guys?
we know your time. It's a little afternoon your time, right?
Correct. Yeah, on the East Coast.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're 2 hours behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, I mentioned this before. Every once in a while, the espresso machine in this place blasts, and it can annoy me. But I can hear you. I can hear you fine now. Hearing a little echo, Jack, or something.
Yeah, that's if you both have your mics on at the same time because you're in the same room, I think.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get it. We're
Yeah.
all set with our questions.
Go ahead. Try again.
Try again.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep talking.
What's
It
in?
sounds better. Yeah, yeah, you
All
both
right.
sound normal now.
And I'm having no problem hearing you. That's okay. There's the espresso machine. We'll talk
Ah,
about it. But
right on schedule.
okay, when do we want to start recording, Jack?
We're recording. Let's go.
Okay, right now?
We're going.
Okay. Welcome to the Lee County, New Mexico Voices podcast series. And our guest today is Mark Danowsky from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Mark is a poet and founder and editor-in-chief of One Art, a journal of poetry. Good to have you here with us, Mark. And
Thanks so much for having me.
um, Take Care is the title of your new book. And take care of yourself, take care of others, take care of the polis, the community. Let's just say, with that in mind, I think of Take Care as a book of political poems, or certainly with a, if we want to put any label on it, I could put that one on, and it would be credible, in the sense that Thoreau's writings were political, and I don't know. I was telling Jack earlier what gave me that idea was I got an email from a friend of mine who was teaching a course in Thoreau, and she said he's a good what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
For the current
antidote
moment.
to all of the political junk that goes on. Go out and look at a tree.
Sure.
But in your case, it's not go out and look at a tree, but go out and look at another human being. Really, I mean, the people in your book, to me, and I read it carefully. Jack has too. Are generic in a good sense of the word. They're human. They're first and foremost human beings, and so that's why. Would you care to respond at all to that idea about it having a political aspect?
Absolutely. I'm of course honored by putting myself in the same breath as Thoreau. I'm a fan of his work, though even more so a longtime fan of his colleague and mentor in a way, Ralph Waldo Emerson. I actually reread Walden during the pandemic, which somehow seemed appropriate. And of course, Thoreau's famous civil disobedience essay is wonderful. I'm going to pivot slightly to Emerson a bit. I think about him all the time. I sort of adopted a concept of his sensibility of being an American scholar into my own life and just how I move through the world. And I especially think about him in relation to the question of travel. But yeah, I've listened, I used to sort of compulsively almost listen to these audio recordings of Emerson's essays.
Huh.
Just, yeah, yeah, almost like a weird amount, especially his art essay, which is just timeless. I just would read and re-listen to it all the time to kind of keep the ideas in my head. And then to his like American Scholar essay, the infamous Harvard Divinity School address. Yeah, so I definitely I see the comparison making a lot of sense. I don't know. It has me thinking a little too of just the why I'm drawn to some of this is maybe the elevated use of language. There was a long time, especially in my 20s and early 30s, where I really enjoyed sort of spending time around kind of elevated language that made me, it sort of felt beyond me in ways, maybe beyond my own intellect, and sort of like being in the room with folks that are they're wiser than I am, which is something I personally appreciate. I think that's like a strong allure of even like a TV show like The West Wing, for example, at least in my opinion. Although I'll say about The West Wing, that's the first time I found it really too hard to watch during our current Trump regime era. But I love Aaron Sorkin's writing, and that kind of power and gravitas in the writing really speaks to me. And there is a political angle to all of that. And then taking it back to Take Care and the concept of caregiving, I think of like the idea of thought as political, which is a Thoreauism, I suppose. I don't know. What's your take? What do you think about that?
My take overall, I mean, and I was mentioning this to Jack before we started. One thing that your book does is there's a certain intimacy that coexists with an objectivity to it. It's deeply personal, yet anybody could relate to it, which is, I think that for me, as I can only speak for myself, the aim of literature, to tap into the human condition, and I think you do that very well. But you do it in intimate ways, like with the poem with the scent of the hands after the tomatoes. Is it? Am I? Yeah.
Linger, yeah.
I can ask because I read the book twice carefully. I'm now got my fingers crossed. I'll get a review of it published. My
It's
track
appreciated.
record is pretty good, but yeah, that's it for me. The intimacy with objectivity would be if somebody said to succinctly characterize the book, in a good attentiveness to language through the whole thing. That's obvious. Um,
Yeah, I
on
think.
to,
Oh, I was gonna just to comment on that. Yeah, I think it's the common observation in poetry that seems counterintuitive that making it personal, in fact, makes it more universal.
yeah, yeah. If you can do that. Um, it's sort of like paradoxical. The more you get out of yourself, the more you get into yourself, or
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I mean. I hope our listeners will get an idea. But how does what you read influence what you write, Mark?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's definitely changed and shifted over time. Started, since One Art started receiving such a high volume of submissions, it's really shifted my relationship with poetry because I essentially jobified something that I love. And so, an outlet of mine has really become Substack, where I write, essays, observations, and such musings. Um, so a lot of what I read is nonfiction. recent times a lot about AI and tech advancements, cultural criticism. Uh, it's tough to say. You know, I used to write a lot of news poems, sort of responding to the news. A bunch of those can be found in the Newverse News. And yeah, I think what I read kind of leads me in the direction to, for one thing, what I'm going to read next. That's sort of like a newer game that I play with myself, is trying to let each text sort of draw me in a direction organically. Um, and certainly, you know, what I'm reading is going to spill over into the art to some extent.
Huh. Well, look, good to know. Um, Getting back to Take Care, Mark, all of the poems seem carefully crafted. You know, and here again, I think I can't tell which ones you worked on more, you know, so they've got a deliberateness to them, yet a thoughtfulness of and spontaneity also. You know, they're oh, what's that, like when I linguistically limber, like a dancer ought to be. You know, they don't seem forced. You
Thank
know,
you.
and uh, but they don't, you know, just think, oh, these are just casually written on a bar napkin one night, be dismissive too. But um, for example, gathering. One thing I noticed in gathering, see if I can, is where you've got the placement of the word next. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah. Uh, the meaning would be significantly changed. Next suggests repetition that connects with building and burning bridges. Um, you know, which we do that is it continually or continuously in life? I think with relationships, you know, building bridges or sometimes burning them too. That's where, and I think it's the next beer, you know.
Go ahead and read it.
Maybe Mark, would you,
Sure.
because we might have questions for you too. Well, we do have questions for you, but I know that poem Eden, we were talking about it. We were talking about
Oh
Eden
yeah.
yesterday
Right. So
in
that's
the
the
on-ramp,
following.
the on-ramp poem. I mean, that's
Ah,
pretty
yes.
unique. But what about, okay, you're going to read Gathering?
Sure, I'll read
Thank
Gathering.
you.
Gathering. Back at my place, the next beer in hand, it's hard to say if I went with intention to build bridges or burn.
Oh, thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
and is there any poem in the book that gave you more trouble or what you struggled with more so than another?
Well, that's interesting. I would say Grace, the final poem in the collection, that's a personal favorite. That's a sort of a
Oh,
darling poem of mine. So I was very excited when that one came into the world and was publicly available. So that was first published in Gargoyle, and I know Richard Peabody is doing, I think, just one last issue of Gargoyle and then closing it down after, you know, quite a impressive history of the journal. But you know, when I looked back on that poem, it was interesting to consider the iterations that it went through. Uh, you know, from early on, I have an original draft of it, and it didn't change dramatically. Something just notable about it that was sort of funny is there's a little story that goes with it. So there was kind of the poem kind of went on from where it ends in in the version that has been published. So initially, I guess the spark of the poem was being at a Stephen Dunn reading at Kelly Writer's house in Philadelphia, which is Penn's University, Penn University campus. It's a really lovely location, and they do some really cool stuff, including having a really neat audio archive. But in any case, we were at a reading for Stephen Dunn, and he's talking about how really just giving a hard time to his ex-wife, who said that when she saw crows, she always seemed to see them in sets of three. And for some reason, he made this sort of offhand jab at his ex-wife. And then later in the reading, he starts reading a poem, and he's like, I can't believe it. And in the poem, he mentions seeing three crows together, and it's sort of like having a laugh at himself. And, so I was thinking about that.
This was
And
Stephen Dunn?
yeah, Stephen Dunn,
Oh,
yes, the
all right.
late great Stephen Dunn, who
Yeah.
also briefly played professional basketball, which I feel like is a fun fact. Um, and so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what we've come to know about certain breeds of crows, really all corvids, but I think it's Caladian or Caledonian crows that have like a very high intellect, and so they're up there with like a 3 to 5 year old human child, and it's a little scary. But so that got me sort of thinking about the animal kingdom. And then I sort of, you can see how that works its way into the poem, thinking about the crows, and then I'm thinking about elephants. And interestingly, to me at least, the sort of anecdote about what happened to me personally and the spark for the poem being at the Stephen Dunn reading ended up not being in the final poem that gets shared. So I thought that was sort of thought-provoking, that in the revision process, the initial spark was really taken, or spark's not really the
It's
right
really
word,
a
but
striking image that you end the poem with and end the book with, and that phrase, taking in the silence too.
yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, one could talk a lot about the silence in poetry and the white space and all of that stuff too. But
The silence, speaks volumes, right?
yeah,
It's as important as the what's on the page.
um, let me go to my next one. And I think if we think in a political way too, that tiny resistance is
Sure.
has a political edge to it. Let's see. Uh, okay, yeah, Jack and I have talked about the poem Tiny Resistance. What did it arise from?
So yeah.
I'm looking for it
So
here.
regarding the inspiration, the poem, it's compact, but this is another one that sort of gets to an interesting place for important reasons. So there's a lot of intersecting ideas in Tiny Resistance, even though it's a very small poem. But it's kind of a braid. So there's some braided ideas. And I owe a big shout out to Dana Knott, who runs Tiny Wren Lit, for encouraging me to actually chop this poem down, as well as a few other somewhat longer poems that first appeared in a micro chapbook, Violet Flame, that she published through Tiny Wren. And Dana was extremely helpful and wonderful to collaborate with. Also, a shout out to her husband, Kip Knott, who's a terrific poet. So really, editorial advice really did me a lot of favors, and actually listening to another editor in this case. So yeah, I cut 3 couplets that were didactic, really, which is a bad habit of many writers. And I've spoken of this before, but it's a bad habit that I had really since I got serious about writing in my 20s. And I've noted that boys and men seem to especially have an issue with wanting to incorporate teachable moments into their work in a way that isn't necessary or appropriate always. And it was sort of laughable as a young person, like in my 20s, I would do this. And not that I'm biologically ancient now, but it tends to come off as rather pretentious when a 20 something starts preaching. And there are always exceptions to this, of course. There are people that are very wise and have sort of old souls. But Tiny Resistance was written in fall of 2020 during the pandemic. And it was just 3 months after my mother had died. I shared an essay with some of my feelings on my mother's death on Substack, and in a sort of awkward way, it has been meaningful that this is actually the most read piece of mine on my Substack. Stay curious. So Tiny Resistance sort of ties together some thoughts on personal versus private grief. Which is something that I talked about fairly extensively and researched extensively for an AWP panel that I co-moderated virtually with Amy Small McKinney, who's a Philadelphia poet. And so dealing with grief and social isolation and just the difficulty of connecting with people, there's, a lot of social withdrawal. And I think, speaking in hindsight, speaking to this now, I think this poem actually has a lot of ties to gathering, which was mentioned earlier.
We get a Tiny Resistance. That sounds like our open mic series. We're lucky if we get more than 3 people. Sometimes it's a good night. But the one right after Tiny Resistance, Limerence. Yes, I had to look up that word in the dictionary, but I said, "Gee, that's interesting," and it's an on-ramp, not an off-ramp.
Mm-hmm.
I know I wrote about this poem in the review somewhat extensively, and Jack and I talked about it. And I was thinking, well, there's a utilitarian aspect to it. I mean, I'm thinking of an on-ramp like for an interstate or something, a busy road, or I mean that's what came to my mind. Just as the poem each conjures an image, that's what I connected with. We've got the joy there, and it's new, and like infatuation, perhaps it's ephemeral, short-lived. Yeah. I don't know. It's just interesting. I've never. It's really pretty one-of-a-kind poem, I think, of Limerence.
Why, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a 4-line poem, which isn't uncommon for this collection, but otherwise it's certainly a tiny poem. And as with the other poems in the book, I've tried to pack as much in there as possible for people to read into. And there's a sort of line there of how far are you meeting the reader? Are you meeting the reader halfway, or how much hand holding, is provided to give the reader, and how much to fill in the gap?
And there's that idea when it's new, it's exciting, and then you get familiar with it, and whatever that it could be my Sony flat screen TV, and then
Sure.
the specialness wears off, and it's just, oh yeah, just another thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a psychology aspect, is sort of habituation and the hedonic treadmill, which are things that I research quite a bit, related to the same basic idea of just getting used to what's not initially novel to us, and then becomes normalized, and then we tend to want more or something different.
I've got I before we leave this subtopic and go on to the subtopic of one art, your meeting will end in 10 minutes.
Yeah, just want to click it off.
Huh? Okay.
Well, we can always jump back on if we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what about with Eden? You know, you've got some white space in Eden, is that right? Um, it's almost like you're there and then you go away, the speaker in the poem, and then you come back. You know, there's that stuff from time, and now I'm trying to get um where that one is again.
So that's page 13.
The first one that really got my attention, the first poem of the book that really got my attention was Matches. I think it was
Uh,
for some reason I got the book, I opened it, I said, "Wow, dude, that's." But going to Eden, um, let's see what page we have.
13 should do it.
What's that?
13.
Oh, 13. We got a little bit of background noise here. Mark,
No worries.
I'm the 77-year-old that resists getting a hearing aid.
Oh, well,
Me.
I know others, so I understand.
People tell me you need to get a hearing aid. Okay,
Well, this is a plug for the getting the AirPods. The AirPods are supposed to work very well for this, and they're not too expensive.
huh,
Yeah, we'll discuss it.
yeah. Um, okay, finding the first garden, I painted its entrance with citronella. Keep out, it now said to nearly everything. Yeah, there's, to near there again, that word nearly, so significant, you know.
Mm.
And I don't know,
This poem has more humor than some of the others.
more humor.
There's a bit of humor.
Huh.
I mean, it depends how you read it, I suppose.
Yeah,
The end is less humorous, but earlier in it, the citronella nod, for me, which this is neither here nor there for the reader, is I just have a lifelong battle with mosquitoes.
me
I'm one of
too.
those, yeah, I'm one of these people that are like extra allergic. So when I get bites, like they're impossible to ignore, and they're these huge welts. So that's like a little kind of Easter egg in there as far as you know, that's like sort of a private element, right? Like all
Uh-huh.
poems tend to have little private elements that are more for the writer than for the readers. But yeah, no, I think the poem itself really speaks to sort of social isolation, social withdrawal, which is kind of a running theme in the collection.
Once again, every word, each part fits the whole very well. I thought the citronella was we were talking about that yesterday. And
Yeah,
yeah, I can see with the mosquitoes. Yeah, I hate one of the
who
worst
doesn't,
things is
right?
to get bitten toward the fingertip.
That
Um,
just happened to me, in fact. It's obnoxious. Yeah.
I got. I mean, I don't want to digress for too long, but I was at my computer the last week of my study, and I got bitten. I still have the red marks. I don't know what it was. It's like something bit me in the chest, and it itched like crazy. And it was spoiling. It was a real good day otherwise, but that was spoiling it for me. And now it's gone away.
Well, in New Mexico, I think you have some scarier things than in Pennsylvania that might be biting you. So
That's
there's
true.
a
Yeah,
concern.
yeah. We're pretty inland though. That we don't have a lot of water, and hence not a lot in the wet. Although sometimes we can have a lot of mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But um, do you okay? This okay? We are. I guess to balance out our podcast, Mark. Um,
Sure.
could you tell us some about One Art? I know I can tell anybody it's if not the most accessible journal, certainly right up there,
Oh,
uh,
thank you.
and very eclectic in its offerings too. But you founded it several years ago.
Yeah, so I did start it as many did. There's statistics on this. right around the beginning of the pandemic, so March 2020.
Oh, I didn't know it was
Yeah,
that
I
recent.
yes, and I tell the story a little different every time. Generally it really felt like the right moment to do it, just given my trajectory with working for other journals and just life things. And I felt like I was in a sort of appropriate, mature state to take on the publisher, editor in chief position finally. But yes, of course, there is an element that many of us had a little bit of time on our hands, and it that made it logistically reasonable to do so as well. And I think, frankly, I needed a distraction from my mother being in the hospital and
Yeah.
what ended up being a not good outcome at all. And so there was, a lot of sort of a confluence of aspects that propelled me into starting the journal. But as for the journal itself, as you know, it publishes poetry only. And like you said, it does tend intentionally towards work that is accessible and approachable, which is a word that is sort of like an unfortunate connotative association, but down to work that I like to call democratic. I really want work in one art to that everyday folks can at least glean something and have some kind of takeaway from what are poems. But I think it's important that at the same time that the poems themselves don't lack depth or gravity.
Jack, do you want to?
Um, given, really briefly, how do you go about the editing process? I mean, what do you find the most challenging aspect of being an editor?
Yeah, that's a complicated one. It really varies in a given day, in a given moment, and what's going on. We had a couple plagiarism scandals that were very time consuming and frustrating. So when something like that is going on, that can draw a lot of attention and bandwidth. I think I think for editors it depends on what you see your role as. This is sort of a answering the question sideways a bit, but like I think it's important that I'm sort of like a cheerleader of other poets and telling poets and writers what they not what they want so much as what they actually need to hear, and about publishing and also the nature of the industry and expectation management. Yeah, the as noted, it's complicated question. Did you have anything specific in mind?
Not in particular, but let me try to do this. Contrasting your role as an editor, how does that influence your role as a poet yourself?
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot. So I tell everyone now I really see myself as a editor first. I wrote an essay or two, actually, but one specifically a few years back about wearing sort of the editor's hat versus the poet's hat. And that's sort of a metaphor too for like when you're writing versus revising. But like being in the sort of editor first role, that's where the lion's share of my attention and my best hours are going towards. And it's really made my own personal writing go on the back burner. I think related to this, that's why,